The Justice Department is charging 2 former Twitter employees with allegedly spying for Saudi Arabia by giving up information on users who criticize the royal family. Joining me now is the Heritage Foundation Senior Fellow for Technology, Klon. Klon, nice to see you. I'm wondering how serious these allegations really are. This was a huge story today, a lot of implications here.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's a big deal. What we have is another example of the intersection between technology and national security. And so these companies, as they continue to collect more and more data, are quickly becoming one-stop shops for any hostile intelligence apparatus that wants to know more information about people who are resisting or protesting regimes. And this shouldn't surprise anyone. We're going to see more and more of this. Today it was Saudi Arabia, but we can certainly assume that China, North Korea, Iran, and others are actively involved in the similar activities. And this is something that the companies and the U.S. government need to get serious about engaging.
Well, it's so interesting because Twitter was such a big piece of the Arab Spring. It's how people mobilized and how they were able to get their message out. And it took 2 major dictators down. So it's interesting that the Saudis are worried about this right now. And at the same time, they were early investors. Well, not Saudi Arabia, but Prince Al-Walid was an early investor in Twitter. They supported Twitter. 40% of their population uses Twitter. And I'm wondering here sort of where the shift has come in, where all of a sudden they've become worried about it instead of supportive of it.
Well, so it's a couple things there. So on the one hand, the Saudi government and authoritarian regimes across the globe are always concerned about the security and the stability of their government. And so I don't think that this indicates a type of new interest or a new concern on the behalf of MBS or the Saudi government writ large. But what you are hitting on, I think correctly, is the role that these tech firms play in those things. As you rightly described, Twitter played a huge role in the Arab Spring. And I think that caused a lot of governments to take a second look and realize that these platforms are more than, potential surveillance capabilities, but that they actually enable the users as well. So certainly governments, if they are able to exploit and leverage these platforms, they can be enabled. But that enabling goes both ways, and it enables the individual and certainly non-state groups as they try to mobilize movements. And so there's a real tension between the two.
Well, this is not a new conversation, at least when it comes to social media platforms and privacy of users. And now we're throwing governments in there. The question really is, whose responsibility is it? Is it the Justice Department's responsibility to police these cases on an individual basis, which would probably be really difficult to do? Or is it the responsibility of the companies themselves to make sure that their employees in this case were accessing confidential data? How do we deal with problems like this?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and the answer is the problem is so big, it's going to take all of us. So on the one hand, the government can do a much better job in terms of doing information sharing with these companies, helping them understand what we call indicators and warnings, signs that give an indication that there's a problem to be considered, and also using intelligent sources and methods to understand what governments are doing. On the other side, companies absolutely have to be aware that this type of geopolitical insider threat is a very real consideration that they have to consider and deal with. So, for example, if I was China, there's no amount of money I wouldn't spend to have an inside look in what was going on in, say, Google or Facebook. And so these are the types of things that the problem is so big, it's going to take a concerted effort. But right now, the government and industry have spent more time giving each other the Heisman, trying not to engage in the way that's necessary, and we just can't do that any longer. The challenges and the threats are too big to allow that to happen.
That's a good point. Thank you so much for your time tonight, Klon.
My pleasure.
Great to see you.